reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are looking at the green special rule. I hope that for all of y'all who are in the States, or I guess outside of the States who decided to celebrate American Thanksgiving this past week, I suppose, because there are some people who do that. I hope you guys had a great time. I hope you ate a lot of food, and I hope you enjoyed the positivity we had for the last 2 weeks, because we're back into something that is bad, y'all. I feel bad saying it. But here it is, the green special rule. It's not the worst special rule in the game. It's not the worst thing in the game, but it's pretty darn bad. Okay, which is sad because it was actually pretty okay, if not really good, last edition. But I feel like it definitely took a nosedive a bit this edition, and it's now at the point where there's legitimate questions. Do you actually take this? And I think it's only niche builds that are actually going to really utilize it in large amounts. So to start off with, when we look at the theme behind what the green special rule is, we're begging the question, so, like, what are we trying to encapsulate? And I think this is where it actually gets a little bit murky and results in some of my confusion on it, as you'll see later in the video. It's supposed to represent kind of troops who came in raw. They didn't have dramatic amounts of training. They might be very confident, or maybe even be comprised of very, very old veterans who are suddenly coming into play and, coming back up, as we'll see later with some variations on the green special rule. But either way, what it's supposed to represent is something that is very unpredictable. And so, as you'll see there on page 120, the rule it's very big, it's very long, but the actual rule is not that hard, right? It's just that they are, again, inexperienced troops. They have a morale rating of 8, but the first time that they suffer a casualty, you roll a die, and on a 1, the unit suffers an additional d6 pin markers and goes down, which is really bad when you're starting at a morale of 8, because it could mean you almost panic, if not panic off the board right away, depending on how high you roll on that d6 pin markers. The second part of the rule is that if you are on a roll of, 2 through 5, so most of the results, 4 out of 6 results, then nothing happens. It's a complete 0. Nothing has occurred, okay? And so if this costed points to pay for, I would immediately be like, oh, heck no, this is horrible. This is horrible, because 2/3 of the time it's not going to do anything, okay? And then on a 6, the unit immediately uprates to regular with a morale value of 9, and related to that, because they're regular, they're wounded now on 4s instead of 3s, okay? Which is great. For the rest of the battle, it's not even just for the next turn, just for the rest of the game, you've got yourself now a morale value of 9. Okay, and this is really the reason why people like it, right? Because typically the jump from inexperienced troops to regular troops is roughly about a 3-point jump. It all depends, right? Because, like, some inexperienced troops, they may not be carrying rifles, so it might actually be, still a 3-point jump, but it kind of feels like more than a 3-point jump. In some cases, a unit might have extra special rules, especially in the case of regular troops compared to inexperienced troops. So to get your regular troops, you might actually have to pay slightly more points for it. There's also the fact that it's kind of like a regular troop, but some nations have subtypes that are available to regulars that are not available to inexperienced troops, like, say, the British Guard subtype, for example. And so because of that, like, your regular troops might still look very different from your inexperienced troops. But the point, of course, is that you're getting basically a 3-point per man upgrade on every single unit, because of the fact that you're on a 6, on a, what is that, like a 16% chance, almost 17% chance, you were able to make it so now you're harder to wound, you have a higher morale value, and you didn't have to pay any points for it, because the points cost for this, just like in 2nd edition, is free. Okay, it is limited to inexperienced troops. Okay, you don't see it on anybody other than them, but it is a free bump. It is a free bonus. And some people would probably be willing to say, well, hey, if it's a free chance to uprate and you didn't pay anything for it, that means that green should be good, right? Because we talked about how, like, Fanatics was good because on Japanese troops, because you don't have to pay for it. It's free, right? So that makes it good. Herein lies the problem. If this was 2nd edition, green would totally have a good rating, because you have a 1 in 6 chance of something really bad happening. You have a 50% chance of nothing happening, and you have a 2 in 6 chance of something really good happening, which is that uprate to regular that you see here. In 3rd edition, though, the chance of failure equals the chance of success. And the 4 slots in the middle, nothing happens. Whereas last edition, you were twice as likely to be successful and get the uprate than you were to have the penalty. And that feels like a good bonus. That feels like a good benefit, especially on, say, Japanese units, where you have a potential rerollable green test from the Kempeitai officer. Okay. And so, I'm sorry, I look at this edition, I look at the green rule and I think to myself, so what you're telling me is I can play Russian roulette with my units and I'm just as likely to hurt myself as I am to benefit myself. And most of the time, nothing actually happens. It's just a complete zero. I don't think that's a particularly good rule, so it makes it into the bad category. Okay. And so as we look at whether or not it helps, here's the deal. Yes, it does save you points, right? It is a super cheap regular unit if you can roll the 6. Keep in mind, it would mean you would need to run basically 2 rifle platoons or a rifle platoon and a recce platoon or something like that. I guess you could technically, I'm trying to think if there are any engineer units with the green special rule. I can't think of any, but my brain tells me there might be one. Possibly Hungarian. I feel like there's like one randomly that's out there that could be like an inexperienced engineering unit. But the point is, if you really want green to work, you would need to take like on average 6 infantry sections. Take all of them green. So all of those are inexperienced. And then after you've resolved the damage on the unit, and ideally they haven't fled the battlefield, you might have one regular unit. And there's a non-zero chance that there's another unit for every, for the one that you got, there's another one that's either very close to fleeing the battlefield, somebody sneezes on him from the other side and they flee, or they might have already gone, right? Like, and that's not good in my book, okay? I'm not a huge fan. On a 1, there, as we've been mentioning, like worst case scenario, you're taking 1 pin for being shot at, and then another 3 to 4 for failing the test. That is 4 to 5 pins on average. That's really bad. Okay, like that's really, really bad for an inexperienced unit. Not only does it mean your opponent now knows you are definitely rallying on that unit, because even a company commander nearby, you're flirting around 50% chance that you even pass your order test to do anything that's not a rally. Alternatively, you could always go down, right? In future turns, you could always go down. But again, like I don't feel like this is good. Okay, it smacks of problems, a lot of problems. Okay, with the way that this is now worded, and again, most of the time, nothing happens. Good news, it's free, so it's not like you're paying points for nothing to happen. But still, that's not going to move it into the good category. That moves it into, at best, the murky category. Okay, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I think, however, the fact that you're passing over other inexperienced units, which we're going to delve into in more depth next week when we look at the Shirker special rule, the fact that you're passing over other inexperienced units that have a special rule that is, slight hint, hint, arguably better in many respects than the green special rule, means that you're actively hurting yourself by trying to take so many to try to get a tiny margin of volume of benefit out of it. I just think there's a lot better ways that you could be investing. Not to mention the fact, I didn't even put this on the slide, but as I think about it now, remember that there's an opportunity cost, right? I mean, even if you're taking just like 6 35-point 5-man inexperienced green sections, some of the cheapest that you can possibly take, okay? Let's say that you're Japanese and you're taking like 6 5-man bamboo horde units, which are even cheaper. They're like 30 points each, right? For a 5-man squad, only 6 points per man. You're still spending close to 200 points in the hopes that one of those 5-man squads, after it has already lost at least one model, right? Because as far as I know, it's not. They roll individually, and the moment you lose the first one, then you roll the green test, and then you get to keep rolling for the wounds against the rest of the unit. You might lose 2 or 3 dudes in one go, and then get to see if they maybe become regulars. And if that's the case, how much value did you get by getting 2, 3, maybe 4 men to become regular? By comparison to what you could have spent all those points on. Right? Because that's the scenario. It's 200 points in the hopes that you can save yourself about 6 to 12 points worth of investment. I'm just not personally sure. Okay. I think it's a lot of hoping that you roll well, a lot of hoping that you're on the high side of averages in order to get a lot of value out of this. Okay. And so toward that end, which units benefit the most from green? Well, I think it's obvious. Japanese inexperienced infantry benefit because 1, since they're fanatic, it means even if they roll the 1 and they add D6 pins and go down, they don't panic as long as you're above 1 man, which, I mean, if you're down to 1 dude and then you roll and you go down, like the unit's already basically gone. So like, who cares, right? At that point. But as long as they're not down to 1 man, at least they won't run. They could have 500 pins on them, and you could still rally them on the next turn or remove all of them. Okay, that's not the worst thing ever. Okay, similarly, They have the Kempa tie officer. Now, we haven't seen any previews on the Kempa tie officer for the new book. I have it on pre-order. We know the new Army Special rules and such. But assuming the Kempa tie officer still gives that re-rollable green test, then it's even better because now you are twice as likely to get the 6 than you are the 1, because if you get the 1, you can re-roll the 1, right? And if you get a 2 through 5, you could re-roll the 2 through 5 to see if you have a second chance at getting the 6, because worst case scenario, your chance of getting the 6 is still just as good as your chance of getting the 1, right? So at least it's slightly more reliable. On average, if you're buying 6 squads, you're going to get closer to 2 units that are getting the uprate instead of just the 1. I'm still not entirely sure it's worth it to buy that many. But one can. It's an option. Okay. So there's that. Related to this, there's kind of a variant on the green special rule, which is also worth looking at, and that's the Volksgrenadier special rule. I thought about doing a whole video just talking about that one, but the truth is it would mostly be a rehash of this one, so I'm not going to do that. But just suffice it to say, Volksgrenadiers is an interesting plan because you're like, okay, well, what we're doing is we're going to buy this German inexperienced infantry section that basically has a modified version of green where if it uprates on the green check, then they have a 5+ chance of becoming veterans, not just regulars, veterans. Now, you do the math on average as to how many of those are actually going to happen. It's not going to be many in a given game. It won't even be much in a 3 to 5 game tournament. Okay. But at least it gives you the option for it. And if you're, again, like, I think maybe they pay a point for it. So in that sense, again, I don't think that's very good either. But like, if you really like the green special rule, it could be nice, especially if you're comfortable with the whole Russian roulette thing and really playing the odds. It might be fun to be like, hey, it's exciting, but it might get even more exciting. Okay. And if that's the case, then good for you. If it made them pass on a 5+, it would be a very good special rule. But it is not. Okay. So, but that is another way that you can do it. Okay. Another way to approach it is just saying, I really don't care per se whether they uprate. That's not actually important. I just need some cheap chaff units to run in front of everybody else. Right. So for example, over there on the right-hand side, you've got some cheap bamboo spear infantry. These are very, very inexpensive. You can buy them for Japan. They're only like 6 points per man, which is slightly more expensive than they were in second edition, which I think is wise because it helps to avoid some of the cheese that we saw last edition. But if I'm running them just so that they're screening and running in front of another unit, and that other unit, say it's a veteran SNLF unit or something else like that, and that's the actual important unit that I want to be able to move up and make it so that they get to their destination without suffering any casualties, it might be worth it to take a couple of just really, really cheap bamboo spear fighter units just to run in front. And if they uprate, fantastic. They're doing their job even better. If they take D6 pins and go down, maybe they already did their job. So maybe that's okay. If nothing happens, nothing happens. They're still doing their job, which is to be mobile soft cover for whatever comes behind them. Do I think that's necessarily the best way to play Japan? No, I don't. But I think it's an option. I think it's a strategy. And I think we're going to see some synergies that might allow for that to be relatively reliable going into the new edition with the previews that we saw on the Army Special rules. So toward that end, I could see that being very useful, especially, again, for an army like Japan that could potentially have Kempa officers re-rolling that role, right? I could see that being effective. But again, this isn't even strictly a Japanese thing, right? Like, you could do this with the Dutch. You can do this with the Poles. You can do this with the Germans. You can do this with anybody. In fact, you can do this strategy with the kinds of units we're going to be talking about next week when we look at shirkers. Okay, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with these, some more effective than others. But the big benefit that green units have is that there's a possibility that not only are they soft cover, if people choose to say, man, this is annoying, I just want to get rid of those guys just to mow them down, remove the order dice, help me with activation draw later, they might actually be better at surviving than some of the other options that are provided there. Okay. And that kind of brings us to the question of, okay, so do I take green units or do I take shirker units if I want to have some cheap chaff units that go before everybody else and help to protect them, right? If I want to run inexperienced heavy mortars, which means they have to use their own line of sight and I'm worried about them being shot at, putting a green unit in front of them to give them soft cover is not necessarily the worst idea because you can look through your own units for the sake of drawing line of sight in the case of an indirect fire weapon. But people would be either giving cover to the heavy mortar, or they would have to shoot at another unit that they don't really want to go after. Is it better to use green units? Is it better to use shirker units? More on that next week because it's not as cut and dry as you think it is. Both of them have their benefits. Both of them are useful for different things. Um, I'm not sure that the risk is worth the reward in the case of green troops, but there are certain reasons why you might consider taking them. And so, what units should have green that don't currently have green in the game? Well, over there to the right hand side, because let's be honest, this is Centaur on his channel. If I have a chance to show a Polish unit, I'm going to show a Polish unit. Okay, that's how it goes. First of all, I do think Polish inexperienced infantry, a number of the men who are called up from the reserves to go immediately into fighting on very, very short notice, they should have the green special rule. Okay. One, they routinely, throughout the 5 weeks of fighting that Poland was in the war, fought to the very bitter end. Like you're talking down to 20% of their entire brigade remaining come the end of the war. Okay. They routinely fought to the bitter end against incredible odds. I'm not saying Polish units should have fanatics. What I am saying is that Polish units, some of them should get access to green, and currently none of them do. Okay, so that is something I think that would be worth looking into. Second, I feel like some of the American inexperienced troops should have green. No unit in the American book has the green special rule. And yet you have a draft that suddenly sees men very shortly afterward, and I would not personally consider it complete basic training to make you at the level of regulars, as evidenced by the fact that you can take inexperienced troops in the American Army list. I think some of them should have green. Okay, maybe not the rear detachment units or anything else like that. Guys who really were not intended to see any combat whatsoever. And as far as we know, we don't have any particular evidence of specific acts of bravery happening among those men. Okay. But I think some of it should be there because there's no doubt North Africa, Guadalcanal, things like that were a baptism by fire. There's no doubt about it. We even reference that in some of the second edition theater selectors. That's kind of a special rule that you can't take anybody veteran for that reason. And so I feel like a number of them performed pretty well. You have some Medal of Honor winners where people were just drafted up, brought in, and decided to fight really hard. I feel like we could throw green on at least one unit. Okay. Not that I feel like it needs it. I think the American list is perfectly strong without it because, as evidenced by this video, green is bad. But I feel like maybe the option should be there somewhere. And then similarly, I feel like Dutch colonial troops, we currently have a Shirker unit, which is great. It works out fine. But I feel like there should be some green units as well because a number of men were called up from reserves, both in the Netherlands proper, but also in the Dutch East Indies. And they fought pretty well. I also want to say, fact check me on this, I feel like there were also troops called up relatively hastily from the Dutch West Indies that also came to fight. I want to say it was in North Africa and also performed decently well. So I feel like there's some room for some green troops in there as well thematically that would fit really well. But currently, as of right now, no green. Not a lot. Then again, there's also a lot that I don't know. Maybe there's an army, Bulgaria or something like that I don't know particularly well that should have green that doesn't have it. But what do you think? Do you think that green is actually a really good special rule? Do you think the fact that it just doesn't cost any points and has a potential to give you an upside, maybe that's enough to call it a really good rule? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.